Hello, and welcome back to Storytime Classics Live, produced by Southwest Shakespeare Company. I am your host, Bo Heckman, and today we have a really special interview yet again. We have Lisa Wolpe today with speaking about her show, Shakespeare: The Alchemy of Gender. I had the honor of seeing this show just yesterday streaming, and it blew me away personally. It was amazing. What an amazing journey. Um, just just an amazing story, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Lisa, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to talk with you.
Thank you. Your show has been absolutely an incredible joy to experience. In many ways, a celebration of life, survival, and resourcefulness. But as I was watching it, I felt conflicted. I'm conflicted. There were moments of enormous trials that you and your family have endured. So it was almost a dichotomy of joy, of light and dark. And it was very interesting. I found myself being joyous and being sad at the same time. Before we begin, are all the details are sensitive in your show. Are there things that you would rather not discuss today, or is everything that you talk about in the show open?
I think it's open. I suppose there's trigger warnings on my show because I discuss sexual predators and suicide and the stuff of life. But that's kind of why I made the show, to explore these taboos and what is the experience, and then the shame and the isolation and the darkness, and what is actually the root truth of it, and how do you turn that into a learning moment where you expand your love instead of break your life in half. So exactly. I would be happy to talk about it. Obviously, it's a show that was 2.5 hours when I wrote it, that I distilled into 55 minutes. I tried to just do the depth charge bits that had really been given me navigational skills for my experience of life. And I excised a lot of the esoteric wisdom and even the personal stories that were painful to me. I tried to distill them into a sentence or a line of poetry or a fragment of Shakespeare. You can see that with the monologues, I ripped them up so that there would never be a completion and an applause moment, because I didn't want to do a series of party pieces done well with then some pastiche of personal details in between. I wanted to say, how do you unpack your heart with words, as Hamlet says, and when you unpack it, you see all this amazing stuff that you carry with you, which I have to say, as an actor, gives me more go-to places for Shakespeare, because it really is about life and death and the afterlife and politics and personhood and philosophy. And people say, why would you do that, old dead playwright? But I just feel like it was the distillation of a collaboration of some very erudite poets who actually cared about people from all levels, who wanted an enlightenment, who wanted a sharing, who wanted a safe way to talk about the miracle of life and the terror of the afterlife, if you will, that was being instilled by the church, probably. And I think, Shakespeare never got thrown in jail, unlike all the playwrights of that time who were, counted treasonous if they challenged political power. Shakespeare, or whoever wrote that body of work, they were able to poeticize the personal so that even people like me can enter into a large, important conversation just with my little bitty individual life. And that expanded bandwidth of how we're all kind of a ripple in the pool, how Shakespeare gives me 26,000 words to express life when otherwise I might just have 2,000. And that then triggers me to look at my own choice of words, as a writer and as someone who's pairing with Shakespeare in offering, I will say this about myself, but then you say this so beautifully in this other situation. So you can see, and I collaborated with Laurie Woolery on this cutting, and, she would ask me things like, why do you say father 3 times? And like, because it's Shakespearean reference to repetition, and I want to keep certain formal rules of the writer alive in both idioms. So, next spring, God willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll be teaching with Octavio Solis, who will be writing in Spanish and English retablos with a group of students who will write their own autobiographical, epic, classic adaptations of self. And so I guess my job will be to offer Shakespeare and Shards of the Bard or other classical writers to help contemporary kids unpack these lines of classic poetry, as you and I both enjoy doing, yeah?
Absolutely.
And then to source themselves autobiographically and say, I want to talk about this ripple in my identity. I want to talk about this broken place in society. I want to talk about my mother. I want to talk about my family. Whatever they want to talk about, they're going to pair it with some of the classics to see when they put back onto the table identity, race, power, sexuality, politics, all these things that are so well spoken to in an all-male cast in a Shakespeare play, because they were flipping gender and they were playing everything from kings to beggars, putting themselves in the shoes of others, walking a mile in someone else's shoes. That was really the reason for my my cut of the solo show, when I decided it would be about my dad, that I began to walk in his shoes, as I had done in preparing great roles like Henry V or even Richard III. What does a warrior's bitterness come out as? How do you bespeak betrayal in your actions when you move back into the world and say, well, this was a mess, let me fix it? And how does that end for the person? Obviously, for my father, it didn't end well. And yet, there being an afterlife, I kind of feel like we can have it begin and end well in a larger conversation over generations, because we're still fighting Nazis and nobody wins. It's just a strange balance of, people who passionately care and people who passionately have a different idea about what power and money are for. So I just think we poets, we're dealing with a lot of opportunity handed down to us by our ancestor about how we pick up a mitt and get in the game. And certainly there's a big conversation right now about why Shakespeare, and let's throw it out because it was a tool of colonial tyrants. But actually within that, there's a very strong line of resistance, girls against being sold into marriage, men into a real explication of what honor and battle defines. What is this reputation that we strive for, even in the cannon's mouth? And so I just have found it a really interesting balance between the personal and the Shakespearean.
How do you build into your life the balance necessary to bring those opposing energies, the tragedy and the triumph that emerged from it, because you are a triumph. I'm just going to toss that out there. You are, together, let alone just get out of bed in the morning, one leg at a time. How do you blend all of that, those energies together?
Well, a lot of it is breathing and the attempt at truth telling, trying to find what is the urgent felt need, the desire to communicate within me. What is it I need to say? And so as I grew up, there was always an adversary for that. Smile more, lighten up, don't be a martyr. This didn't happen to you. You're actually doing quite well. You're 1% of the most privileged people in the world. Or you don't need to tell anybody who you sleep with. Being gay is not a thing. You shouldn't talk about it. Or, if dad wanted you to know that about him, he would have stayed alive and told you himself. Or all of the things that family and society say. And so I just have my own relationship with my father across time. And I feel that uplifting his name is very important to him. And in that he lives in me, it's very important to me. And in a parallel story, so many families were torn apart in the Holocaust, for instance. I know there are many genocides to talk about today. However, with the Ashkenazi Jews, from whom I now understand I'm more than 75% tribe member, it's been just horrific. So I feel like a lot of the older generation doesn't talk about the Holocaust. As a result, now 60% of Americans, they say, don't believe the Holocaust ever occurred. So, we look at history, as many of us have been attached to the election cycle this year. feeling that democracy is very important and that fascism is very dangerous. So, as a truth teller, as an artivist, as someone who wants to make a change in the world that I live in, someone who was taught by great women, Kristen Linklater, Tina Packer, Mary Conway, Natsuko Hama, someone who was taught to make a creative incision in the body of work that was once white male dominated, and say, where's her story? Where's our story? What stories are being left out? And so I do have this 11 minutes of tape, which I don't know if it's the right thing to offer to your audience right now, but
no, it's actually, I was about to transition right into that, right here. I would say, we've had your close friend and colleague as our artist in residence for 2 seasons, Deborah Ann Bird. She tells us of your tales and your exploits in Harlem doing the all-female Othello. She calls you fun, adventurous, adorable, and sometimes even silly.
Yeah. Well, that's nice because I often get intimidating. I get a lot of badass and silverback.
in watching your show, The Alchemy of Gender, I can see, I can sense you're affirming compassionate and strong life force, embracing life through art and making the world a loving, beautiful place. And if you could tell us about the theater company that you are in LA that you were a part of creating and all of that, that could be in your video there.
Deborah Ann and I did an all-female multicultural Othello in, I think, 2007, which I came to New York to helm for her because I knew the play really well and she wanted to play Othello. And I thought, well, I could do Iago and we can all play. And some of my excellent friends came. Catherine Misley from Broadway played Amelia. Brooke Parks played Hermione. Just really, really some of the best actors that I know. And now, of course, she's been playing it for 6 years. But I just wanted to show this piece because in 1994, I first directed an all-female multicultural Othello starring Fran Bennett, who started the company with me in 1993. I started the Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare Company in 1993, about the same time as Kristen Linklater and Carol Gilligan started Company of Women, which was an international all-female company. So I worked with them, and we did these long residencies for 3 years on our first show, which was Henry V, which I played, Henry V. And we did it at Smith College and Shakespeare and Company. But for 3 years, we did residencies on university campus with like Smith College and University of Virginia, or we just went to a lot of universities. We were paid equity salaries. We taught workshops for women and girls, and we developed a very strong aesthetic. Many of those master teachers joined my company as well because I was a West Coast person and they were East Coast people. And because Kristen wanted to spend 3 years on every show, and I wanted to get a show up in 3 months, being very fast and young, I ended up putting up 23 years of shows where Company of Women folded after a year or two because, actors just couldn't commit 3 years to a play anymore because of economics. But the power and the aesthetics of her wisdom and her training really formed my life. Do you want to watch this little thing and see if it's interesting?
Yes. Yeah, go ahead and show us this.
Let me see technically if I can do it. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to play this. Wait.
It's the first time I've seen this.
Sorry.
They could be
I'll just
called
start from the top. Okay.
downright Shakespearean. Here's correspondent Derek with the story.
This theater season in New York, an all-male adaptation of Romeo and Juliet called R and J have been wowing audiences with the driving energy and erotic fervor of adolescence. Of boys who will be young men.
Give me your pardon, sir. I have done you wrong.
In Los Angeles, a theater company has been getting raised for its all-women productions of Shakespeare.
Don't you? I'll know more on it. It has made me mad.
But what is revealed when same-sex casting is used to explore the passion, violence, and theatrical thrill of the world's greatest English-language playwright?
That which we call a rose by any other word would smell as sweet.
With R&J, director Joe Calarco's attention getting twist was to stage Romeo and Juliet as a play within a play, being read in secret as a scandalous story of sex and violence by 4 boys in a repressive prep school.
Draw thy tool. Here comes at the house of Montague.
The result? A striking exploration of forbidden love.
Through doing the play, through doing Romeo and Juliet, since it being such a passionate play about sex and violence and rebellion, they experienced those things themselves. The idea of the school was to mirror the world that Romeo and Juliet live in, was to find a place that was very repressive, had very strict rules about what a man is, what a woman is.
Without women, men will resume the savage state, and the comforts of the home are exchanged for the misery of the mining camp.
By doing the play and experiencing those sort of passions, they learn about freedom.
If thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully. Or if you think I am too quickly won, I'll frown and be perverse and say thee nay, so thou wilt woo.
Since it's being all men, of course it's has a huge resonance, especially their first kiss. It's the first time I've seen that scene where it actually worked to me, that it seemed dangerous and sexy. And you can go back to when you're a teenager and you kiss your first boy. It's sort of terrifying and sexy at the same time.
Give him my sin again.
The word we talked about a lot in rehearsal was danger. The danger of this age and the passion of this age in terms of where people are just beginning to really discover sexuality.
Thou shalt not.
By the fact that we are placed in this very structured environment, it really lends itself to, I think, what the 2 young people in the play are going through, because they're not allowed to be together, and yet they have all these feelings that they want to express.
By the end of the play, the schoolboy has learned so much about his feelings, and the journey has taken him to a different spot where he's not going to just conform and go back to the old life, but that he's had some enlightenment about who he is.
They go from real homophobia to an acceptance of understanding and saying that it's okay, that love is just love, no matter who's experiencing it.
In R&J, love is love. With the Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare Company, not only love, but hate, revenge, passion, and power also make up a landscape where, on stage, a person can tread. Their successful all-women productions of Shakespeare are proving their point.
The king now drinks to Hamlet.
The Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare Company exists to bring women's voices out into the world. And it's a multicultural, all-female company dedicated to producing Shakespeare at the best production values we can manufacture.
You shall relish of it. I loved you not.
I was the more deceived.
Get thee to a nunnery.
It's an all-female company because women are multi-layered and they're capable of so much. So when you do Shakespeare, which is the best writing in the English language, it really takes you on a journey. And when you play the male roles, which are fully written, you really get to show a range of thought and feeling.
Oh, thou to slander her and torture me. Never pray more.
Now, with Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare, we all are women who want to do Shakespeare.
If there were poisons, knives, cords, or suffocating streams, I could endure it. What I were satisfied.
Fran Bennett has worked with numerous regional theater companies as well as in film and on television.
Would, nay, and I will.
But she was drawn to Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare because it offered a new challenge.
The possibility of playing roles that you do not get an opportunity any place in the world to play. Roles that are big in passion, in desire, in love, in everything. There's nothing small about Shakespeare.
Lives. My great revenge had stomach for them all.
As a woman, we're very seldom ever asked to be strong, to go that big, to really be powerful.
Down, strumpet! Tomorrow, let me live tonight if you strive!
The idea is to transcend the limitations of gender, all the boundaries, all the stereotypical boundaries of what women can do or are.
Getting a room full of women who have a goal, the power that they can produce is amazing. To put up 20-foot walls or build a 3-level story platforms. It's a huge team. The last production that we had, it was 50 women and girls working together. I can't tell you how many times I had some of these young girls come up to me and just say, you know, they were amazed that we had built this.
An all-women company has raised the inevitable question.
You do get that question, is it a lesbian company? For the most part, less than 1/3 of the company is a lesbian or an out gay person. There's mothers, there's wives, there's, you know, women bring their children to come down and help on the set. It really makes for a much more family atmosphere.
Lisa Wolpe and Mia Torres, who are both gay, they know that being open about their sexuality can create further restrictions in an industry already short on strong opportunities for women.
The prejudice will stop you from working. I know that being out can further limit the career of a professional. I know that in Los Angeles, where most of the production people either are gay or are really aware of their gay friends, they either won't talk about it or they'll have a double standard about it. It's not, it's still not safe, but it's a heck of a lot better than it was 20 years ago.
And 20 years ago, there was no Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare Company trying to expand the limits, trying to do better Shakespeare.
Every part of me is alive when I'm playing Shakespeare. I can feel it down to my toenails.
Is it vital growth again?
Shakespeare's like feeds my heart, my soul, the part of me that I think is really me. And I think one's soul needs feeding too.
I just wanted to show that to see if it was any use to say, put some perspective on it. How did that feel to watch? Is that okay?
I don't think the video came through, but the audio did just fine, and we were able to hear everything very clearly. I didn't want to interrupt it. It was.
You interrupted me. I don't know why the video didn't come through.
Yeah. It kind of played like a beautiful radio drama, but yeah, the information was definitely conveyed. Yeah, and very interesting, very enlightening.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but what I wanted to show you was that 30 years ago we had a completely multicultural company. You would have seen Black and Asian women on the screen playing Shakespeare. I'm sorry that didn't work out. I'm always afraid of technology. Anyway, radio show. We've been doing this for
right there with you.
it's my whole life. I was a writer in residence at Stratford-upon-Avon, Shakespeare's birthplace, last January, and I was able to get 40 boxes of Charlotte Cushman's personal correspondence. So Charlotte Cushman was the most famous actress in the world 150 years ago. She was a lesbian, and she played Hamlet and Romeo famously better than anyone else in the world. So I don't know why she's been forgotten, but I'm going to write a solo show about Charlotte Cushman.
I look forward to seeing that.
Thank you. It's just an old tradition of flipping gender and trying to figure out why people do what they do, with the added benefit of, you know, the excitement of pretending to be something that you're not and having all the fun that person can have. What questions did you guys have, Bo? I'm sorry that I interrupted.
Oh, no worries. No, yeah. The next question I had was if you could please share with us what inspired you to tell your story, and what was the process you went through to bring it to the stage.
Well, in 2005, I embarked upon a low residency MFA program at Goddard College. I just wanted a teaching credential. I didn't want to be trained in theater anymore. I already had that training. I was already teaching as an adjunct. And at Goddard, I got this really interesting, every semester in an interdisciplinary MFA program, you pick a different mentor. And my second semester there, I requested Dvorah Newmark, who's a very, very smart Jewish lesbian rabbi. And she posed the question to me whether I was anti-Semitic. And I was very offended as, you know, a liberal leftist Democrat. But I actually didn't know much about my dad. I just knew that he, you know, had shot himself when I was a kid and that he was a Jew. So that's what happened. I started to write my thesis, which was really, I wanted to look at why do I play male characters? Is it fear of men? Is it a fascination with their power? Is it the roles themselves? Is it avoiding being a victim. So that's when I started to codify, what do I actually do in order to take up space? You know, how do I straighten up my gestures? How do I female and how do I male? You know, and I just started trying to codify it with the idea of writing an actor training book or some way to help people who are doing same-sex all-female for the first time, because I had played many years of clown and many years of fool, and I had a lot of training. But then I started to get into the why of it for me. And a lot of it was when I was a kid in the Canary Islands, just running around on a tropical island with my brother, playing with him, play acting scenes, you know, La Sombra Negra, El Cid, El Vencedor. You know, we spoke in Spanish, we made capes, we had swords, we adventured, we explored, we were physically competing with one another. You know, our desire was to be Achilles and Patroclus. You know, we wanted to be the front line of the glistening athletes, you know, who were leaping from rooftop to rooftop and climbing volcanic rock and plunging into the sea. And so it was us and nature and language and fight scenes. We were speaking German, Spanish, and English by the time I was 7. And I had fallen in love with Greek mythology when I was about 6. I became an avid reader when I was 3 or 4. I would just get a stack of 7 or 8 books and just plow through them, you know. And I remember one day in the Canary Islands, on the island of La Palma, a gypsy troupe came to town and they put up a tent. And there they put up a play. And we all went and we paid our 6 pesetas to get into the tent. And we had a ticket. And we watched Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs as a community. And then there was an intermission and my number was called and I won. And I went up on the stage in front of the whole town and I was given my choice of the used toys that they put out. I got this wooden fire engine whose paint was, you know, peeling off, but it was for me to receive. And then they did the second act of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. And they were completely transforming. I think it was 6 or 7 actors doing all the parts, you know, all the dwarves, everything. And that was my first play. And later in life, in Disneyland, I was hired to play the Queen in Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs in a $7 million musical with Patrick Stewart as the mirror. And we did like 5 shows a day, 4,000 4-year-olds every, you know, in Disneyland, in Tomorrowland, we had our own theater. And it just reminded me of that transformational place of imagination and an apple. You know, you could be this hag or you could be the most beautiful woman in the world, all in a 35-minute, $7 million musical. And that's just how I feel about Shakespeare. It's fairy tales for grown-ups. And so why did I do my solo show? Well, I was writing this thesis. And then I was directing an all-female As You Like It. I was playing Jaques, and a woman came into the audience. It was a cowboy version. A lot of fun, a lot of music. And she was very moved by the production. A friend of hers was in it, and everybody was having a tremendous time. We had a lot of parties after the show at that time. I was pretty tired. It was 2002 or something. it was a tough. No. When was that? I guess it was probably about 2007. It was about the time when money for the theater wasn't available.
Right. Yeah.
So this woman who ran the Gaia Foundation called me and said, we want to fly you to Provincetown. We're going to give you a house for a month. We're going to give you a bicycle and a new Mac computer to use while you're there. We're going to give you $600 a week and we expect nothing back. And this was a kind of relief program that she did for women who had been giving a lot and might be burnt out. And it came at a great time for me because I'd been hit by a car. I was directing an all-female Winter's Tale in Vancouver and I was jogging and I got hit by a car. I had really high pain levels, really hard movement challenges. So I was flown to Provincetown in the first time I've ever had a house to myself and not to have to worry about earning any money for a month. And I started watching the television show Lost, which is basically about Paradise Lost, which led me back to my key question, which is what is the swan signature in Shakespeare, which led me to Mary Sidney, one of the writers of Shakespeare, which led me to why are they eclipsing the female writers that are authorship candidates for Shakespeare, which led me to this feminist outcry. And by the end of the month, my friend Margaret had come over from the Provincetown Theatre Festival and said, you finished that play in a month and you put it on in my brand new Women's Theatre Festival. I'll give you $1,000. So I finished it, and that first iteration was 2.5 hours long. Quite brilliant. Lots of personal, soul-shaking stuff, a lot of esoteric stuff, and a long section about my company and how we developed our aesthetic and what we were actually doing. Because I was at the Globe Theatre for a month in 2000, working on that stage with 13 people from around the world. We were called the International Fellows Program. So in the morning, I would run monologues on that stage, and in the afternoon, they would give us a chance to interact with each other. So I was playing Posthumus, a male character, on the Globe stage with Mike Alfreds, who was directing Mark, the artistic director, in the same role at the same time. But on that stage, I did one of our classic gender switch exercises, which is pretty profound. We go back and rebirth you as another gender than what you were accepting now. And then you grow up as a Shakespeare character with that room, those genitals, those friends, that given circumstances. And so the stage manager of the Globe ran up afterwards and said, you did this and this and this and this. And he was pointing at the old alchemical tome and said, you would have been burned alive. And we're so happy you're here, that you know these secrets of the dance of the body centers. We worked a lot with Glenn MacDonald there, who's a sacred geometry specialist for Mike Alfreds and for Mark Rylance and for the esoteric artistic people who run the Globe. There's always a lot of people who know a lot about ancient wisdom. So, you know, just as a shapeshifter, it was important that I build a piece about shapeshifting. Because it wasn't until I'd already played Viola and Rosalind and Juliet and Moliere and all the ingenues, and I'm already like 18, that I started looking at Malvolio, and to say to myself, because no one would say it to me in 1989, you should play whatever you want to play. You should play whatever you want to play. And so you didn't see the footage. I just tried to show you, and I'm still embarrassed about that. But I have tons of footage of these shapeshifters for 30 years. For 20 years, I only worked with women playing everything. But then I started working with men playing everything, and trans people playing everything, and non-binary people curating gestures for this or that performance. Mm-hmm. And then international people translating Shakespeare into their own visual language, first and foremost, right? So I went to see the Scottish play at the Berliner Ensemble, and it was 7 naked people covered in blood in a sea of fog for 2 hours.
Wow.
I was like, this is it? But when they went, Heil Macbeth, you were like, oh my God, that's what that is. Hail Macbeth is Heil Macbeth. And so in that environment, it created that shimmer across time that we like to create across time and gender and race, where you can be anything. But it's still, if I put a black Cassio into my Othello, as I might do or have done, there's a shimmer across the all-white productions in the past. So in a way, it heals that retroactively about, but you know this could be interpreted by any actor, and who they are would make the play more complex, not wrong. You know, then you look at the rivalry between Othello and Cassio, 2 black actors, but from Florence and Venice, from included to excluded, from warrior to mathematician, all the differences. That's not just about skin color, is it? And so then you get the shadings of the communities that we actually live in. Our As You Like It that I mentioned, which was in I don't remember the year, but we had a Native American medicine man as our advisor and participant, who created the deer dance in the center of that play to honor the deer, which I was playing Jaques and directing it, a cowboy musical. But because we're radical reinventors of Shakespeare, looking for the real questions, we had to look under the cowboys and their rivalry and the way one brother would kill another, and you wouldn't take care of women and children, and everybody's a refugee living in the forest because you're fighting in your family and we all suffer. And so then we looked at the indigenous community in the forest, because, you know, in that play, they meet a medicine man in the forest, and the bad Duke is healed. His mind is changed. Charles is changed. So then we used that understanding to try to decolonize that play. So I'm just wanting to say that because, now it's 2021-ish as we think into our next seasons, and we're not doing these things for the first time. And I just want to make that clear. It's not the first all-female Othello. It's not the first Black actress playing Othello. It's not the first time First Nations people have worked on Shakespeare. It's not the first time women have played leads. What is interesting to me is that people are obviously forgotten. So Charlotte Cushman is forgotten. People are not talking about Fran Bennett. They should be. She's in her 90s. She has done all of it. The fact that she's not known, and Mark Rylance is, it's a question of public money spent on that artist. And just all my life, it's been 80% of the money spent mostly on the white men, 80% of the lines spoken in films and theater, white men. But it was never challenged when I was young. That was an entire 30, 40-year process to get to Black Lives Matter and women writers must be honored. And, there's a lot of change that I wanted to celebrate. I guess I want to say that because I'm not sure that the education is getting out there. I'm not sure people know that this is a long line of discovery. And if you ask me why I did my solo shows, those two things. Why is it in a family that we keep forgetting the lessons? Like my mother and father, a Jew and a Christian, couldn't get along. Like what did you not learn from the Holocaust that you would both end up committing suicide for a lack of love? How lucky were you to get to where you were, and what happened in your life? And so, you say, so every day I have to go out in nature and breathe, and I have to balance the fear of missing out on what everybody else is doing with this very narrow pathway of what I think I should be doing, in honor of my ancestors and also in honor of all the theater students who are still hearing, like I did when I was young, that women don't direct, and you've got to put on that miniskirt and that makeup to show up on camera. And, here's the way to inflect your Shakespeare, and here are the 5 men who know how to do it. It's just that whole wall of crushing, disappearing focus. Like the Black Lives Matter, who now think, let's look at our writers. Let's look at the Asian writers, the Hispanic, the Latinx writers. Let's look at writers other than Shakespeare with all the money that we have. And I think that's totally valid, except for the poetic syntax that has opened my mind over time. I can never assume that I know what a Shakespeare line holds, because the way the words are placed together means I have to actually look at those words more deeply. And obviously, like in my solo show, part of it is almost like method acting, where if you're charged up personally about something, the heartbeat in the poetry comes stronger. My desire to communicate that, this is what tyranny is. This is what sexual predators are. This is what healthy resistance is. This is what words can do for you. I have all that. Follow this Shakespeare flag stuff, which is great. But then, for years, the stuff I wrote about myself, I could barely memorize or deliver, whereas the Shakespeare is much easier. And I think it's that Brechtian Verfremdungseffekt, where you're just a little bit protected by the character in terms of self-revelation. Mm-hmm. And then stuff I say about myself, I think we all have stuff about ourselves that we could use. And I know I've been questioned for me using my life as a reason, but I think it's really helped me. For instance, I don't feel like an orphan anymore. Before I wrote my solo show, I felt like an orphan. Now I feel intensely tied to my father's life, very proud of him, very interested in him. And the more I'm interested, the more information comes in. So I just got a whole book about my grandfather, my father's father, which I didn't know existed, which proves that he was an international spy selling illegal Irish visas to rich Jews and stole like 30,000 marks from the German government, which is why they came after him, why he moved from Berlin to Paris and then to Belgium. So now I'm trying to write a movie about my dad, thinking, what was that dinner conversation like? between my dad, who saw himself as a boxer, a freedom fighter, and an intellectual scholar, but was also a masseur and a bricklayer. Like, my dad was an interesting guy, and his father, who was a very rich bourgeois Jewish Berliner who had fought in World War I, who pushed that system and lost. Ooh, and I can just imagine them exploding at each other, like who felt safe in this new regime.
That is
and all that money that they cared about, that was just taken anyway by the Nazis. Nobody in the family got to keep it. And why did my father not go back and get the millions of dollars his father had left behind? He didn't go back to fight for that money, which is very interesting to me, because when I found out about the money, I was like, oh, we should have that money. We're poor, you know. But there's a 50-year end for reparations, and it was 52 years since the war was won. But I was curious, like, why didn't my dad, when he went back after the war, say that money is mine? Because one of the reasons that he died is he only had $250 left in the bank, and he was just breaking. He was breaking as a man. And my mother's family was very wealthy, and she had taken the 3 kids away. So, like, I'm also interested in money and what it protects you from and what it doesn't protect you from. This false idea of artists are stronger if they're poor. And me, having actually lived with all of the compromises that artists have to go through, and thinking a lot of the reasons I have self-doubt is because I don't have any money. It's hard to just go, that's okay, I'm just going to pay a year's rent and write this story. Like, no, in that year I have to direct 8 shows and go to 6 different states and go overseas, and I have to travel to work. So this pandemic has been very interesting, because usually I spend all my money on theater tickets and travel. But it also opens up this time to write again. And it did not come overnight, this solo show. I struggled with it and cut it. And if it wasn't for Laurie Woolery kind of coming in, and she's a genius, and saying, let's just put all the ideas on 3x5 cards, and let's just go, which of these are essential, and which ones did you read in a book? Or just think of it as a trilogy, and there's part 2 and part 3, and we'll put that over here, So,
were there ever moments where you were overwhelmed by just the sheer subject matter, the sheer scope of everything that you were trying to tell? Were there moments of doubt where you were just going, I don't know if I can make it through this? And obviously you did, with great style and and artistic flair. But were those moments where you were just kind of like, I don't know how to tell this, or it just became overwhelming emotionally?
Yeah. There are times when it's just really scary to do. It's scary to memorize it and own it and say to the writer, which is me, stop thinking about the choice of word and just trust me. I thought about that word. That's your word. You're doing this. And the other thing that happened was, since I locked the script with Laurie some 7 or 8 years ago, I found my father's notebook. I found my grandfather's big crime. I have found so much information. I have a whole new box of letters of my father's and letters from my father. We have since opened a museum in Winnipeg, Canada, for my father at the Winnipeg Rifles Regiment's home, where, they then found a bunch of stuff. They built a beautiful exhibit. We opened it just over a year ago on Remembrance Day, and it's going to tour Canada.
Wow.
So I just think there are, for the level to which I can focus on the depth and genius of my father's journey, there is a no end of result. I try to go back to my world in Shakespeare now and think, what can I do on Zoom that's really valuable? So I've been experimenting with showing this tape of my live show. But the live show was invented for me to Johnny Appleseed my way through the world, saying, here's what I actually care about. It's not my career. I want to make a connection with some human beings in this room, telling the story, opening my heart. I will include my best bits of Shakespeare I can make at the moment, from some of my favorite scenes, of my favorite plays, of my favorite playwright. And I'm also tell you why this helps to say something when you're in extremis. And then, so there's all the trepidation up until the performance. Then there's vocal warm-up, memorization, trusting the brain. Then there's breathing in the group of people in the room. Then there's bringing the ancestors in and praying. Then you step out, you actually do the hour. Then I sit with my water and with the audience, we process for 15 or 20 minutes. People say things about their life. They ask questions. We exchange things we notice that scared us or surprised us or that we loved in that hour. And in a way, it's a human experience to be in the room. So in this particular week, I showed it to 300 people at Boston University, 20 people at 300 people at UC Santa Barbara, 20 of the Boston BFA actors and graduate kids, Indiana University, and then this weekend we're going to show it to you guys. I know you've already seen it, Bo, but I'm trying to see if there's a virtual experience, a way to speak virtually. To me, it's better if someone just saw it and then we're sitting together.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in this moment, I'm tap dancing a little bit, but I think we got into some good conversations. I know I'm going in long sentences. I'm sorry. Are there questions from the people who are listening, or?
Let me check our feed here and see if there are any comments. Just a lot of welcomes and people glad to see that you're here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
I will ask you, watching Alchemy, I was, and this was actually something we formed this morning when I was talking to Mary. When I was watching Alchemy, I was grieving that I never got to see you play Iago.
Oh, okay.
What you did? What did you do with that part? It's like doing double duty and transferring gender and taking on this Manson-esque psychopath who, without lifting a finger, made everything crumble. How did you embrace this nihilist and bring the humanity to that? Which I can tell that the humanity is your trademark that you so well handle there.
You know what made me mad, Bo, is that guy slept with my wife. I mean, I don't buy this motiveless villain stuff. You slept with my wife? I will end you. I will end her. And all y'all. This deeply angry, jealous man who's also a racist. And I just love the actor-audience relationship. It was those, 7 monologues? And you start out being brilliant and funny and handsome and witty. And then you just keep getting twisted in front of people until, a little bit like the president right now, you don't think they're with you anymore. Do you know what I mean? You're like, oh my God, you know, like, and you never let other people tell you. You're just like, no, I'm not a villain. So I liked it. And it's more subtle than Richard III, which I get a little bit Snidely Whiplash in that role. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit comic sometimes. Harder to, when you're at that level of theatrical exuberance, it's harder to be subtle in a way. It depends on how big your theater is. So I played Shylock in Utah.
Yes.
Outdoor amphitheater, which was awesome because then you're really working on, this with you guys and that with you guys. You've got the balcony and just a lot of actor-audience conversation, which I think is great. And with Iago, we're experimenting a little bit with camera. You can look at the camera and kind of do it. But what's nice in live theater is the people talk back. When I did it in Harlem with Deborah Ann Bird, we were sold out standing room only, and the audience up in Harlem were shouting back, "Don't believe him, he's lying to you." "Oh, no, you didn't." "Oh, you said it." It was so
that must have been
fun.
Such an awesome experience. If I could go back in time, I would make a point to stop off there.
It was thrilling. And the cool thing was, like, a lot of the people who came to the play, because they're not Shakespeare nuts, didn't know the ending.
So it was all really
they're like, "What? You did not kill her. Oh my God."
To experience that. Yeah.
So that excitement, man, that excitement. But also, like, for the LA Women Shakespeare Company, and because my work was born out of a Shakespeare Company aesthetic where you want to tell the truth and shame the devil, "Oh, that my tongue were in the thunder's mouth, then with a passion would I shake the world." So that's Shakespeare, right? But you want to do it with a full breath so that you're risking something, really challenging authority. So we were always doing talkbacks all the years of my company. We'd sit with the audience for half an hour after the show. And when we did Othello, Fran Bennett was out in the parking lot warming up, and O.J. Simpson's Bronco literally drove right by her with the police chase. And this was 1994. It coincided exactly with his escape from that scene of the crime. And every night we had these fascinating discussions because they were parallel. A black hero kills his white wife. What happens next? So the conversations in the theater were fascinating. And for some reason, because we were all female, they wanted Desdemona to fight back more. They wanted her not to turn the other cheek and not to be a Christian and not to let the man have his way. They thought if a woman were playing it, I'm like, a woman often plays it. It's the role. You have to follow the text. She dies.
Can't do anything about that. That's
no, she could have left with Lodovico, but she didn't. We told her she was dumb. But yeah, that's the fun part of it. If you're fully invested, the audience is too. And there's something about a same-sex company. For us, as an all-female company, it was so much fun for women and girls to come and see themselves on stage. I mean, lots of cool men would come too. You know,
I'm sure for them it was seeing a portal open, a world of possibilities that were probably hidden, saying this is possible. You can do this. Look,
yeah, that's
we're doing it well, and please join us and pass this along.
Yeah, and so now we're looking at who is the actor now who wants to queer the canon or non-binary the role or go across race, or like, what are you doing now and what's your point? Do you know? And it's perfectly acceptable to say, I just wanted to play the role. It was a cool role. I wanted to say those things. Actions. I wanted the sword fight. I wanted the jokes. I wanted the girl. I wanted the crown. But underneath that, there is a real, I will say, sisterhood of empowerment, but I think it's also a brotherhood or a humankind thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where I know for myself, wherever I go on the planet, I can find a Shakespeare lover, where we kind of drop all the boundaries immediately. I did my solo show in Berlin last year, and not in Berlin, in Bremen, a couple hours from Berlin, and boy, there were trans people in the audience, there were philosophers, there were teachers, there were so many. It was just like when I did it in England, and I was doing it at the Rose Theater for 3 weeks, and the firefighters came and they said, yeah, in firefighting, when a firefighter, his job ends, he commits suicide. You know, that your identity is somewhat wrapped up with PTSD and risking your life and throwing yourself into the front lines. And actors are, in a way, very hard-working warriors for the upliftment of souls, you know. And I can't sing, so if I could sing, I would sing all day long. But, you know, I can put singers in my ears and I can dance, or I can put Shakespeare in my ear and I can be influenced to deliver at that level. And so for that, that's healing for me. And also for my students. I mean, most of the students, when they first look at it, they think, why do I care about this? It's incomprehensible. So, you know, it takes a lifetime to make it feel effortless. And one keeps looking for the deeper question. I remember watching Peter Brook's Hamlet with Adrian Lester at BAM 15 years ago. And there was nothing left of Hamlet but 12 pillows, I think, and some actors. The whole theater had been scraped away. Like, we don't need anything. Let's just, what is the poetry? What's the Zen moment inside of this? And someone else might want to, you know, like Sam Gold might want to flood the public with garden hose and, you know, have people run around in their underwear. So it's just a question of your interpretation. But for me, it's always been heartbeat, empathy, politics, personhood. And it has been an artivism effort just to get the right to go on stage. There's a huge fight even for me to go to Utah. They didn't want a woman playing a leading role like that. The old guard, they did not want that to happen to Utah. And they told me, we brought this Shakespeare to Utah on covered wagons, and our first show was Merchant of Venice. And I'm like, that was a long time ago. Anyway, I already played Shylock 15 years ago, so you decide. But I will deliver that role at an excellent level for you. and you will not know I'm a woman when I play it because I will use my techniques to disguise myself as a man. So those are all very radical ideas even now, to disguise yourself as something that you're not. The pushback that I got over facial hair for Shylock was huge. I had to argue for myself to say no other actor has ever had to play Shylock without a beard. Just as when I went to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, I had to argue with Bill Rausch of all people, great god of integrity, because he wanted me to wear a mask to play Jason in Medea. I'm like, I have been in Medea so many times and directed that play. The women of the chorus can be in masks, not me. I'm Jason. And they're like, yeah, but you're short. I'm like, but I'm Jason. I'm not going to be short on stage. Napoleon was short. He got let down. Don't underestimate me. And I know how to stand on a stair and, put a knee up and make myself a Shakespearean character just far enough away to seem larger than I am. But there's a preconception that women don't have facial hair, or women don't have anger, or women don't have swords, or whatever that no is. And then a lot of directors say, okay, well then let's make Hamlet a woman. Let's make Caliban a woman. Let's make Prospero a woman. So then you're up against your aesthetics. Like, I don't think women behave like Prospero does. This is about men and how they behave. It would be slightly different if it was women, I think.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we regender a role. So in Orlando Shakespeare, I played Antonia in The Tempest as a female character. And so immediately like, well, do you want to have a sexual relationship with Sebastian? And I'm like, no, I think we can plot murder without the woman manipulating you sexually. I'm just over it. And then at the end of the play, Prospero forgives Antonio. So because that's the text, he had to forgive Antonia. Where never in the canon has an ambitious woman ever had a ruler say to her, for your ambition, I forgive you. In no play ever. All ambitious women have to die in every Shakespeare play. And they're commenting on Queen Elizabeth. Sure they are. Women should get married. Women should have heirs, But, it was just to regender it, for me at least. And I would add some things as a woman, like, oh, I have a special relationship with my niece because women have relationships with their nieces. And Miranda, I'm going to give her back her mother's ring in this private moment that no one in the audience will see. When I take her hand, I will give her the signet of her mother. Do you know what I mean? Say, we have a moment. You're home. I've changed. I will do the maternal thing of loving you because I'm supposed to. But then you can do both. You can be female and also be a Machiavel, which is kind of interesting. And so a lot of the women gain power when they play male parts, and a lot of the men lose power when they play female parts. So a lot of the men make it comic, and a lot of the women actually want sociopolitical sway. So when they play something and they say no, they can stand inside of that. Even if it's Hamlet saying, frailty, thy name is woman, it's ironic because a woman put the theater company together and the woman is playing Hamlet and she's not frail. Of course, part of me is frail, and I could do Kate's last speech from Taming of the Shrew. Why are our bodies soft? Why do we sue for peace? But I think because I know so many great men, Bo, like yourself, or like Erwin Apple, or like, Christopher Edwards, or the gentlemen that have been leading the classes that I've checked into in this week, they're really good humanitarian teacher guys. They're really artists and scholars and leaders and fathers. And I just love that about the arts, that the people that I love the most have been the people who have guided children, helped parents with Alzheimer's, kept companies together, even though individuals had problems, supported this person who couldn't remember the lines, helped that person who needed childcare, extended grace to that person who's bipolar, but a very good actor. Like the things that we're able to embrace within how interesting and flawed we all are. I think that's important. And it's not about gender.
No.
But the toxic masculinity, which was very much in place when I was a theater student. Alan Schneider was my mentor. He was brilliant, but he would literally throw chairs across the room and fire student actors who were doing Thornton Wilder for the first time and didn't know what he wanted. Do you know what I mean? It was very tricky. And so now, even in counseling younger actors, do we want to have a toxically masculine Henry V who just disassociates and becomes one with God and starts hanging his friends? And if we do that, are we commenting on it, or are we just doing the play as written? Do we have a thought about that? So there's a lot of stuff you can do as an auteur, as a director creator, who says these differently abled people can be included, and this hearing differently person can be included, and this non-seeing person can be included. And then we create ways like Deaf West to see, the lights of the theater strobing with the beat of the music so that everybody can have a theatrical experience. Or we have longer conversations with non-white Shakespearean actors to say, how's this scene sitting with you? I know you're playing Benedict in a 1920s version of Much Ado About Nothing with the white guys, but when it comes down to it, and your people would not have been allowed to hang out with the king in that way on that day, do we need to redefine this scene? My next project's going to be a reverse gender taming of the shrew with a very good black actor who's a man playing Cat and a very good white actress playing Petruchia. And it's set in the American West. And I was desperately searching for a time when an uppity black man would not be killed and could get through these scenes and challenge in this way. And, I sent it to a friend of mine who's black to read it. And he said, well, you've left in rope. You've left in so many trigger words from the original show. Tell me how you're going to rehearse this. I said, slowly and carefully with your advice. And he said, okay, slowly and carefully with conversation, we can make this thing explode. But you got to kind of get to a place where you're challenging the expectation, which is, well, of course the girl's going to lose in the end. Of course, handsome Petruchio is going to be the sexually desirable man that she just wants to sleep with. And if she doesn't say this speech, they won't consummate their marriage. I mean, those assumptions aren't real. The real question is, what is grace? How do you put your hand underneath someone else's foot and not let your ego run your marriage? I think that's the question of the last scene. I think they both have a lot to learn. And it's a very painful speech when you say they own us. Do you know? He's your governor, your lord, your husband. He's your everything. Without him, you've got nothing. And so to check into the disempowered part of the actor, whoever plays that, and say from that place of, I can't, it's bigger than me, and not have the out. I can't go to Canada and get married. I can't, the border's closed. I would go, but I can't because of the law. And so a lot of times in the Shakespeare plays, you look at Capulet yelling at his daughter, hang, beg, starve, die in the streets. And you have to say to the young actress or actor who's playing that role, Juliet, no options. You have no options. No one will hear you. The people that really love you can't hear you. Mm-hmm. And then the nurse turns on her and says, you should marry Paris. Get over it. Your feelings don't matter. And then she does the vial of poison that could easily kill her, but it's this, sleeping drug. But she's afraid of death, but she chooses death over living with people who won't hear her. And luckily it's a play, but you wonder, why is that the most popular play ever in the whole history of the world?
It speaks from us. It speaks to us.
Yeah, because we do have love and we're innocent and we desire to go forward towards love from our hearts. And the naysayers are everywhere and the haters are everywhere. And so many kids stumble on that path towards they just don't have enough resources. I think about the trans people whose lives are ending before they're 30 years old, whose families are throwing them out with no resources. They're living in the street and people won't hire them. And there's just very few ways forward when you're hated. So those Shakespeare plays can be reinterpreted for a modern time if you want to.
Mm-hmm. I did have to say, you briefly played the role of Romeo in your show, and I know when I saw you do that, my world exploded. I sat up straight. I almost jumped out of my chair, and I said, "Yes, that's Romeo. That's my favorite Romeo ever." And I've seen a lot. Tell us about your Romeo.
Well, I had a great love for play, and I'd also done 4 or 5 years of Red-Nosed Clown. And I had a couple of teachers, John Haddon, for one, who did a balcony scene in A Clown Knows, pure clown. He and his ex-wife, Susan Dibble, they did a beautiful clown scene in a class 30 years ago, but it stuck with me because it was heart lifted. It was very uplifting. They were very much in love. I wanted to play Romeo. I wrote the play in clown. And as I did that, it was so painful because clown doesn't talk very much. I was trying to make it very few words. Then I didn't get that grant for the clown version. And by that time, I had so fallen in love with the play that I produced it in a 50-seat theater, and it got the front page of the LA Times. It was sold out. Rachel Houck had built the set in my carport. We worked with a lot of people who later became incredibly famous. But at the time, we were all working for free together, just with a dream of making something really sexy and fantastic. And it was very exciting because it was erotic, and brilliant Shakespeare. But a lot of times when I see Romeo and Juliet, they literally have a gay man on stage playing Romeo, or he's just an older man, or it's so all the matinee girls are falling in love with him and it's all about his abs, and he doesn't really seem vulnerable. He seems more like a movie star. But, like you, I've seen 10 million Romeo and Juliet, so I'll always be willing to see another one.
Oh, of course.
But what happened was two of my great master teachers, Fran Bennett was the nurse, and Natsuko Hama was the friar. And Natsuko and I co-directed many of the shows I put up. She's just genius. She works at USC as is she head of acting or head of voice? I don't know what their titles are right now because everything's moving around, but she's probably the greatest master teacher that I know in the world for breath and Shakespeare. She was Kristen's favorite teacher. And I got to work with her most of my life. So, yeah, I've got a tremendous amount of material. I'm trying to cut a documentary, but there are over 1,000 women and girls in that 20 years of work. So I'm trying to figure out how to pay for that because you got to buy all the actors out through Screen Actors Guild.
As you reference in your show, you developed this shield as a child playing with your brother, and you took on these boyish. You started dressing with it and did all that. You created this incredible this shield as a coping mechanism and turned it into a skill that would define your career path and create such pure beauty and art from as an antithesis to what almost sparked you to do it in the first place. The dark impetus that you talk about in your show. And I just wanted to toss that out there. How did you come to the theater? And where did you train? Who were your mentors? Who inspired you?
I started in high school. John Hill was my theater director. I was bored. We came back from the Canary Islands. I spoke several languages, and by the time I went into theater, both of my parents were dead. It wasn't so much having someone to impress, it was having something to do that was smart. And I think the first thing I did was Crojack and Don't Drink the Water. And my director wanted me to wear a catsuit in black spandex with high heels as a Russian interrogator. And I remember arguing with him about how sexist that was. I won. I ended up having sensible shoes, kind of like Olivia Colman in The Crown. But he wanted me at 16 in a catsuit. And I really articulated that because I was not only editor of the paper, I was editor of the alternative paper. I was going into college as a journalist, and I was a political animal. And I wanted people to write stuff down. And I was writing skits for, the Spirit Club, but I was also writing about Rousseau, and, I would help get a smoking grounds, but I was Chief Justice of the Student Court. Like, I wanted what I now have, which is a voice at the table about the way things were going down. And I grew up in a high school that was rednecks against the hippies. I lived on a dairy farm with my grandmother, and it was very cliquey, kind of like the red and blue states. Like, you couldn't know everything. And I was like, you have to know at least this town. You've never been to Berlin or Portugal, or what's wrong? Like, you should travel. You should learn something. There's more than just the left and the right side of this 800-person campus. So then my director looked at me sideways and he said, okay, we're playing Claire Zachanassian in The Visit. So at 17, I played probably the greatest role I'll ever play, the richest woman in the world, in an incredible story by Franz Wedekind. And that started to tour to the other high schools because I was serious. I was throwing down. And then I took a 2-year break. I went into college as a journalist, and then I learned about how the corporations were controlling all of the content in the newspapers. And I realized what a tricky game it was. It was before the internet. It was before Facebook. But I was already studying the trends and controlling what the citizens would know. And I became editor of the college paper, and I saw that the same people were writing in. Most people didn't care about what they wrote because they knew it didn't affect them. And I wanted to get involved in life. The other thing is I went to college in UC San Diego, which although there are Asian people and Spanish-speaking people, 50% of the people in La Jolla, where I lived, were millionaires and above. So it was a very rich community on the edge of a naval community that was ignoring the interplay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my teachers were Alan Schneider, who premiered every Albee, Pinter, and Beckett play in this country. He took me into the graduate rep, even though I was an undergrad, and he took me through every word of what he said to Elizabeth Taylor on Broadway when they did Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, trained me as a director, put me in the graduate rep as an actor, and then told me, but you can't direct. Because you're a woman, you'll never direct. You need to figure out what to do with your hair and clothes and go be an actress. And you don't need to go to graduate school. Come to New York. I'll put you on Broadway. Here we go. So I moved with my husband to New York and immediately started doing Shakespeare, directing it. And then tragically, I was slated to be in an off-Broadway production of a Beckett play called Catastrophe, directed by Alan Schneider, when he was hit by a motorcycle and died in London. He looked the wrong way. He died. I howled for a long time. He was like a father to me. But he was a truly brilliant and excellent man, a personal friend of Sam Beckett's. He really believed in me, and he gave me the confidence to never quit. Partly because he was so brilliant and believed in me so much, only to the line of where I was a female. And I think, if I had a dad, I'd be fighting with him about that, all the choices I make that make my life harder, which probably not smart in that way of go the path that's already been trodden. But it's been great in terms of you can make a new path. You just have to dream it and do all the work. And I think I closed my company because after about 20 years, I stopped dreaming it. And I was just going, well, we have these leading actresses and we haven't done that play. And here's the funding. And, it was more practical. But also my dream switched after a while into pay equity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how can I pay the women who are doing such brilliant work? And is it right for me to ask them to do a 99-seat waiver play and then promote me as if I created it? How am I going to elevate all these 50 women and girls that are in this show? And I didn't want to do more administrative work. I remember going into Ben Donnenberg's office. He was paying equity for a Romeo and Juliet at the same time as mine. I went and auditioned for him. He said, "You're a great actor. What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I can't be in it because I'm actually playing Romeo, but I wanted to ask you about your life because you're a Broadway actor. Now you're doing this. You're helping, Hispanic actors learn Shakespeare in East LA. Where's this heading? And should I be doing what you're doing?" And he said, "For God's sake, Lisa, don't do what I did. I spent all my time in board meetings. I have to take rich people out to lunch. I never get into the rehearsal room. I'll never act again. I might be able to direct once in 3 years, but I'll be so busy with the celebrity in the middle, the Tom Hanks or the guy that I'm wooing, that I'll never meet the people, Now, Ben was great. He gave me free rehearsal space for a number of years because he has a space. And I would say that advice really scared me because, like a lot of actors, I'm creating something that I want for myself and my friends to be there. Now I look around the world whose company could I join where I had that kind of sway now? And I don't know, that there is a company I can join. I should probably join the educators and just teach full time because I'm 62 and there just aren't that many roles that I haven't done that I want to do that would be worth moving heaven and earth. There's plenty of actors I believe in, but now I understand why they need $1,000 a week. Because now I've been a regional actor for a few years. In order to do that, in order to travel the world and go to regional theater, I had to stop what I was doing here.
Yeah.
Which I did because I wanted to legitimize myself, kind of like the MFA, or I got accepted to a PhD program. I'm just like, I want to finish. What's the end of this? What's a terminal degree? But I think it's an ever expanding realization, and the pandemic is clearly telling me that I have time to rethink it. And that's what I think is important, that when we have time, we really go back to the basic questions of what is at the heart of my mind?
Right.
I don't want to repeat myself, but is there something not clear about this, segment? So I think I'd like to make a documentary about the last 30 years so that we can truly address what the questions are now. Because it better not be, can a woman play Hamlet?
Yeah.
It's more like if we're queering
if we're still asking that question. Yeah.
Yeah, like what is it? What is your question? And how have you even read the plays? Because a lot of kids who haven't read the plays are coming onto the classes going, yeah, but should we really do Shakespeare? I don't feel anything when I look at it. It's not for me to tell you that, but I can tell you I have spent 45 years looking at it, and it continues to delight me. So there has to be a way to get your hands in the material. I'm sure the first time you make an ashtray in clay, it's just your hand smashed into some wet Play-Doh. But if you have a kiln and some skill, you could make art.
So I'm going to attack that differently this time and prove them what it, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think you might have just answered this, but I was about to say, tell us about your dreams and plans. Where do you go from here? What do you hope to accomplish from here that you did not just say 2 seconds ago?
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping to have the discipline to sit down and write my father's feature film. I have tons of material. I think that's the most important one because it's personal. I'd like to write Charlotte Cushman's thing because I think it's amazing for me as someone who's bisexual to know that this queer woman was the most famous person in the world and nobody had a problem with it in the entire world 150 years ago. I think that's a great role. I want to write it for Margot Robbie because she has a Warner Brothers deal where she can make 7 Shakespeare movies at full money value. She
Wow.
One about Mary Scott. So I think this would be a really good role for her to make famous.
Absolutely.
I could probably do it in a solo show, but I think it should be big so everybody can see it. Because sometimes they do something like Anonymous and it tanks, and people are like, nobody cares about that stuff. And you made the movie wrong. You didn't. That's not the story. I mean, Charlotte Cushman went over to. Well, I won't tell a bunch of stories, but she was just a phenomenal woman who created a sanctuary for women artists. And her wife, Emma Stebbins, sculpted her. She sculpted her as a rather stocky angel in Bethesda Square in the Bethesda Fountain. That's Charlotte Cushman, sculpted by her wife, Emma Stebbins, and the only female who did that at that time. So I think there are really good her stories just for queer culture that should be out there. And also for people who think they've got to radicalize the canon. I just want people to know it's already been done, that it was done initially as a bunch of men doing something really radical and interesting. Even the prose and poetry variations are so interesting in terms of modern hip hop and the way we change rhythms and create memorable songs and enhance our memory through rhyme and repetition and wit. There's so many things that Shakespeare did that we still say,
Mm-hmm.
I am teaching next week in Romania via Zoom all week. 2 hours a day. I've got 18 BFA and MFA students in Romania who want to learn Shakespeare at like $150 an hour. So there's all these strange things that come out of the pandemic. But what I would hope is that I wouldn't be going week to week. I don't think I have to because I flipped a house with my partner this year. I think I have the rent. So it's just that thing of what if you sat still? Like now I'm getting emails from Prague and Minnesota and California where I'm supposed to be directing 3 jobs next summer saying, we look forward to seeing you. I'm like, in May? Are we doing this? Can I get on the plane and gather with 80 international theater people in small theaters in Prague this May? So I think just as a backup, I want to write a movie script of my Taming of the Shrew Cowboy gender flip.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it would shoot really well in a barn because it's cowboy. It's not that many people. It's 11 actors. I could get it to 10 easily.
Mm-hmm.
And just do like a quarantine of a pod. Make the work. make it shorter because Zoom attention spans are shorter. And maybe then make a companion piece, because I've directed Taming of the Shrew 7 times, saying, this is really fascinating. Look at this. Look at this here. This is cool. This is an opportunity, you know? And I just don't think at this point in life we have to go, oh my God, is Taming of the Shrew a misogynist play? You know, it's like, we've had this conversation before. But when you do the misogynist play, how are you going to open it up so that you can see everybody's humanity and make it entertaining and hire people and pay them living wages while they make that? I mean, that's one of the concerns, right, with Zoom, is that all the actors are working for free. And that's really hard for the actors because people are asking them to do 30 hours a week of a Zoom thing where the money goes to the organization. Mm-hmm. But then the actor's working 30 hours for free when they have no job or unemployment insurance. And it just creates another kind. I mean, it's interesting, but it is not the pay equity model I was fighting for, where it's like, how can we get more college-age women into equity contracts instead of the non-equity Desdemona? How can we get the equity Desdemona? How can the Brabantio contract go non-equity and the Bianca contract go equity, if you follow me? Because the female roles are often done by younger people who are not paid, or they get $300 a week with no housing.
Yeah.
And the other roles, like $700 a week with housing. So those things are very important when you try to survive. I think not very many people are going to survive, and then we're going to lose so many freelancers. So I really appreciate Southwest Shakespeare Company engaging me to show the video and to have a conversation and a Q&A next week, so that, you know, like, it helps me stay alive and it keeps the conversation on screen a little bit. But what are actors?
Well, I know we're all just like, we're really looking forward to the screening of your show, and from one who's seen it already, really, this is not to be missed. It is a very interesting, very emotionally invested show that you've put together, and I can't wait for other people to experience. And I believe that is the word, to experience this theatrical moment.
Thank you, Bill. It does. It's only 55 minutes. It's got, I think, 7 or 8 Shakespeare pieces in it. And I'll be with you guys on Sunday the 29th from 3 to 4.
Yeah, Lisa will be with us for a talk back on Sunday at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Be sure to tune in to see that, because that'll be your time to pose your questions and to get a little bit more information on her show. Thank you so much, Lisa Wolpe. Thank you for your time, your incredible talent, and your humanity, and for sharing them with all of us. From my perspective, this has been an honor. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. And we all look forward to seeing your show.
Thank you, Bo. You've been an angel. Thanks for all your kindness and your compliments. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sorry, everybody. I'm sorry I didn't get to meet you.
Yeah, sorry. I look forward to the day where I could meet you in person.
Me too.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for tuning in to Storytime Classics today with our special interview with Lisa Wolpe and her show, The Alchemy of Gender, Shakespeare and the Alchemy of Gender, not to be missed. Please tune in and check that out. Thank you again for joining us, Lisa, and catch us next time on Storytime Classics Live. Thank you very much. Have a great day. And remember, please wear a mask and please be safe out there.